White House sees positive prospects for peace in Ukraine. What will Witkoff be secretly discussing with Putin? Increasing pressure on Russia. More strength to Ukraine from partners, Russian FSB and the military base targeted. Russia can't afford war. Soldiers revolt as payments cut. After another round of negotiations, the peace plan was significantly revised and now looks better. This was stated by the President of Ukraine during a joint press conference with French leader Emmanuel Macron. According to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian delegation reports to him on all the details of the dialogue with the United States. One of the key issues has been the question of territories.
I thank our negotiating teams. The plan looks better. To give a general idea, we discussed various issues, including territories. The conversation lasted 6.5 hours. The negotiations are ongoing, and the U.S. negotiators shared their vision with us. They also want to share their point of view with the Russian side. We are receiving full feedback. I am getting feedback from our delegation. They will fly to Ireland and give me a step-by-step update on where we stand in these negotiations. And as I understand it, the U.S. will also receive the corresponding reaction from the Russians. Later, we expect a discussion with the U.S. President on the key aspects.
The administration of Donald Trump has a positive outlook on the chances of ending Russia's war against Ukraine. This was stated by White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. According to her, the president's team is making every effort toward a peaceful resolution. Leavitt described the negotiations between Ukraine and the United States in Florida as productive.
This is sort of the shuttle diplomacy that you've seen from this administration play out, where we speak equally with both sides. We've put points on paper. Those points have been very much refined, but as for the details, I will let the negotiators negotiate, but we do feel quite good, and we're hopeful that this war can finally come to an end.
The Institute for the Study of War believes that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will reject the conditions of the peace plan regarding Ukraine during his meeting with the U.S. Special Representative Steve Witkoff today. The Kremlin is setting the terms to avoid publicly discussing the results of the U.S.-Russia meeting on December 2nd, possibly in order to obscure Russia's likely refusal of the peace proposal from the U.S. and Ukraine. ISW believes this week could be crucial for diplomacy. This was stated by EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, ahead of the meeting of EU defense ministers. According to her, it is necessary to strengthen Ukraine's position as much as possible and to increase pressure on Russia.
I'm afraid that all the pressure will be put on the victim, which is that Ukraine has to make concessions and obligations. Whereas, in order to have peace, we shouldn't lose focus that it's actually Russia who has started this war, and Russia that is continuing this war, and Russia that is really targeting civilian infrastructure every single day to cause as much damage as possible. So yes, I'm afraid that all the pressure will be put on the weaker side, because that is the easier way to stop this war when Ukraine surrenders. But this is not in anybody's interest, not in the interest of Ukraine, not in the interest of European Union, also not in the interest of the global overall security.
The Italian government has approved the 12th military aid package for Ukraine. The decree was signed by the country's defense minister, Guido Crosetto. The document authorizes the transfer of vehicles, materials, and equipment to Kyiv. The list is contained in a classified document prepared by the General Staff of the Italian Armed Forces. Its contents, as in previous cases, have not been published for security reasons. It should be noted that since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Meloni government has sent Ukraine 11 military aid packages totaling around €3 billion. Strengthening Ukraine's air defense was discussed by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ukraine's Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal. Their meeting took place yesterday in Brussels. The parties also discussed the situation on the front lines and the priority needs of the Ukrainian armed forces, Shmyhal reported on social media.
Key issue: strengthening air defense. To counter Russian missile and drone attacks, additional systems are needed. as well as the missiles for them. Special attention was also given to the role of the Pearl Initiative, which is critical for stable supplies. It was emphasized that Ukraine continues to adapt its defense sector to NATO standards and principles, and to implement joint projects with partners. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Zelenskyy tours French facility ahead of Mirage and Rafale jet acquisition. During his visit to France, the president of Ukraine toured the production facilities of an aviation company that manufactures Mirage and Rafale fighter jets. Volodymyr Zelenskyy held talks with the plant's management, discussed prospects for cooperation, and reviewed the technical specifications of the multi-role aircraft that Ukraine plans to acquire from France under the declaration signed in November. At night, drones attacked locations in Chechnya, Russia. Local residents report that the attack damaged the FSB building and also targeted the Akhmat unit's base in Gudermes. The Akhmat Battalion is a collective name for several military and police units based in the Chechen Republic and under the direct control of Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. Formally, most of these units are part of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs or the National Guard. The Akhmat units actively participate in the full-scale war against Ukraine, carrying out combat operations as well as, according to Ukrainian sources, blocking and propaganda activities. Cannon fodder. That's exactly how the Second Army of the world, the Russian army, has always fought, by literally bombarding the enemy with its secret weapon, Russian bodies. 1,000, 100 years ago, or even today, the Russian government, from any czar to the present one, has never cared how many people killed. We know this, you know this, and the Kremlin certainly knows this. This is why the Kremlin paid for Russian life. Everyone who joined the Russian army hoped that they wouldn't die, but someone else instead would. Well, now there's even more room for hope, because the Russian budget no longer has room to pay its soldiers. Yakutia, a key supplier of Russian contract soldiers, has frozen all military bonuses due to lack of funds. This marks the first visible budget collapse caused by war and mobilization. Even Finance Minister Ivan Alexeyev admitted the situation is dire. Compensation for injury, $8,300, and death, $11,000, is also on hold, leaving soldiers to rely on disability benefits or die without pay. Yet the State Duma shows no concern.
The overall trend is not too healthy, and one can conclude that the country's resources are gradually being depleted. However, I am confident that for true patriots, money should not be the primary motive for defending the motherland. Alexei Zhuravlev, First Deputy Chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee.
It should not, of course, but it still is, and the defense industry is crumbling. The Yaroslavl shipyard, which builds landing and patrol ships, hasn't paid salaries to 850 workers since the end of September because the Ministry of Defense stopped paying contracts. Just stopped. The shipyard has been operating under EU and US sanctions since 2019, which further blocks funding. So long war story. Money short. Russia is trying to sustain a major war on regional budgets that are already overwhelmed. The first wave of collapse already began in areas where Moscow is accustomed to relying on cannon fodder, and more waves are coming.
Russia is facing a critical shortage of auto parts. Even Kremlin-loyal media admit that compulsory motor insurance repair deadlines are being missed everywhere. From January to September 2025 alone, the Financial Ombudsman received 101,000 complaints, 16% more than the previous year, and a record since 2022.
There are cases where service stations contracted with the insurer refused repairs due to long delivery times for spare parts, because repairs cannot be completed within the legally mandated period, or simply without giving any reason. Quite often, illegal solutions are offered. The station is farther than 50 kilometers away, or repairs will take 120 days instead of 30. Owners of fairly common European and Japanese brands face difficulties not only in the regions, but also in Moscow itself, from a publication by Russian state-aligned media.
The Russian authorities have no intention of tackling the shortage of auto parts or improving people's lives in general. All of Putin's efforts go to the army. He has signed the 2026 budget and the 3-year plan, in which almost 1/3 of all spending, a record since Soviet times, goes directly to military needs, nearly 13 trillion rubles for the army and arms procurement. Another almost 4 trillion is allocated to the so-called national security item, the Interior Ministry, Rosgvardia, Special Services, and the prison system. In total, the power bloc will receive over 16.5 trillion rubles, 38% of the entire country's budget.
Taxes are being openly raised, that is, levies on citizens. And this is not only the VAT increase that will automatically goes into the price of all goods. They've also invented a bunch of additional fees alongside it. The tax burden on small businesses is increasing. And all of this, yes, is in the interests of the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex puts nothing on the table for Russians. Everything it produces instantly evaporates on the territory of Ukraine.
While the Kremlin not only extends but increases military spending, Russia's social sphere is sinking deeper. According to calculations by the Siberia Reali Project, one day of the war against Ukraine costs about 30 billion rubles, the annual budget of an average Russian city. Meanwhile, 1 in 20 schools in the country has no heating, running water, or even indoor toilets. The worst situation is in Murmansk region. There, up to 77% of school buildings need major repairs. In Kirov region, 69%, and in Karelia, 65%. The paradox is that one day of combat costs the Russian budget 160 times more than building a new rural school for 200 to 300 students, the project concludes.
It's already clear that by 2026, no new school will open. Construction has stopped. Why be surprised? Our region is in a budget crisis, the authorities say. Soon there won't even be enough for benefits and salaries. Orphans aren't being given housing. Guys are going to war because of poverty and to move up the housing queue. Elena, resident of Sludyanka, from a publication by Radio Free Europe.
Due to chronic underfunding of the regions and the complete lack of prospects for young people, hundreds of small Russian towns risk simply disappearing. This is stated in a Russian Public Opinion Research Center report. Young people are leaving en masse for places where there are jobs and at least some chance of a normal life. The older generation is gradually dying out. New residents almost never arrive in small towns. The report's authors note that the reason is not only low salaries. Small towns are suffocating from poor infrastructure, lack of services, and any real development opportunities.
What the war actually costs the average Russian citizen. I think many understand that this is a problem. These are personal problems when people die. These are problems connected with rising prices. And these are problems connected with normal living conditions in general.
As the Moscow Times writes, Russia has 1,120 cities, and more than 70% of them are small, with populations under 50,000. About 3.5 million people currently live in such towns. But in the last 10 years, their number has fallen by 314,000. So, according to researchers, in the coming years, Russia may lose 129 small cities. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
More than 100 small towns in Russia could disappear in the near future. Young people are leaving, there are no prospects, and infrastructure is collapsing. The Moscow Times notes that people lack not only money, but also basic living conditions. At the same time, the Kremlin is pouring tens of trillions of rubles into the war against Ukraine, into a place where equipment and resources are being destroyed on the front lines. Our journalists report on the consequences of Putin's all-in on war strategy. Stay with us. More facts, less noise ahead. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with the bell on. See you in the next digest.